Hello, Sharon Hilgers. Happy birthday. It is your
70th birthday.
70th birthday. She's all. We have an audience here for this little interview that we're going to do with her, and we'll just jump right into it, Sharon. First of all, your first memory that you can recall.
Oh, my very first memory?
Yeah, do you have one?
Well, I do, of my dad throwing me up in the air and almost dropping me.
Wow.
I do remember being
Any idea
scared.
the age on that?
Oh, I don't know, 2 probably.
Yeah?
I do remember that. And my dad was a big, burly man with size 17 ring fingers, and he was very strong. But I remember that. Mm-hmm.
Huh.
So since you asked that, that was my first fearful thing that I remember.
So the first childhood memories and stuff like that with your sisters and brother?
Well, I was the second youngest of 7 children, 5 girls, 2 boys. And 4 of my sisters, Monica, the youngest, myself, and my twin sisters, Jean and Jane, we had to sleep together in this, we called it the North Room, which had really no heat. And I slept with Monica, and Jean and Jane slept together in this big room, but we had lots of fun.
Full-size bed, do you think?
A full-size bed, oh yeah. No queen, only full.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We'd cuddle when it was cold. And
it was a one-level home or 2-story?
2-story. Mm-hmm.
So it was upstairs?
Our family farm used to be a granary when Mother and Dad got married, and they converted a granary to a small house, and then they had children, and they kept adding on and adding on and adding on. But it ended up being still very small, about the size of your mom and dad's house, Gary.
Okay.
It had 3 bedrooms upstairs. My 2 brothers, Dale and Riney, had a bedroom. My sister Mary Kay had a bedroom, and us 4 girls had a bedroom.
Okay.
And then Mother and Dad were on the main floor.
And
1 bathroom, and we got a bathroom when I was 5, indoor bathroom when I was 5.
Indoor. You had to go out to
the got plumbing.
outhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. You remember what type of toilet paper you had? Regular toilet paper?
Sears Roebuck. Outside a lot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then inside, my dad was, we didn't have much money, and my dad was, girls, that we could only use 2 squares of toilet paper. Think about that as a female.
Wow.
He would just nag at us about that all the time.
Take inventory
Growing up,
every
it
day.
didn't go well. Put it that way. He was overruled most of the time.
Yeah, with 4 independent women and mom.
Yeah, so we had outdoor toilets, and the thing is, if you had to go and someone was using the indoor bathroom, which was when I was 5, so you have to run to the outdoor toilet. And it only was a 1-seater, not a 2-seater.
Yeah. And
I remember being very afraid to look down into that hole to see that yuck. It was very scary, like here at the lake.
How far from the front door was it, do you remember?
I don't know, Steve. How far? 100 feet maybe? I don't know, 150 feet.
That's a distance.
It was a distance.
You don't want it too close to the house.
No.
Either. Huh.
Another thing I remember when I was 5 is 2 things. I used to love the movies, pretend I was at the movies, and for some reason the disc, our farm machinery, this disc with the disc things on it, were sitting in the yard a lot. I don't know why, but it was great for going to the movies on, because you could climb up on it, sit on it, pretend you were up high at the movies.
The outdoor movies?
Well, it was just to pretend. It was my imagination.
Okay, gotcha. Oh, okay.
And so I fell off of it, and my eye here, I still have a scar that should have had stitches and gone to the doctor, but we didn't do that back in the day. My eye was all bloody. My mother thought I had lost my eye. I had fallen, and it hit one of those discs. So that's why I have this scar from that.
From that
event.
Performance that
My performance
went bad.
Yes. And then George Berger, one of our neighbor boys, his mother was a teacher, and George was a year older than I was, and he had to have his legs in both casts for whatever. Right. And so my mother would babysit him while Maxine taught school. And we had turkeys, and this is a really awful memory, and I spoke to George recently, and he remembered it. Is I would have to take him outside and haul him around the yard in the wagon. I was 5, he was 6. He had these casts on his legs, crutches in the wagon, and it was, it was in the spring, so it was kind of rugged terrain around the yard. I didn't like to do it. And the turkeys found us in the middle of the yard. Turkeys put their wings down and charged us.
Wow. And
Mother's in the house on the phone, and I ran away and let George sit there and get the turkeys picked out of the wagon. Oh my gosh. And I got spanked for that. That was one of many spankings.
How old do you think you were then?
I was 5, he was 6.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. He remembers it. I saw him like not a lot recently. We talked about
But you had a phone. Was it a party line phone?
party line phone.
Explain to people what a party line phone is.
Well, a party line phone is, let's say our neighbors, like ours was like, a short and two longs, and somebody's might have been two longs and a short. So you knew kind of when, and eventually you could pick up the phone. And Oscar Kunze, who was my very old uncle at the time, when I started talking to boys in about the 7th grade, Oscar, this is years later. I mean, I was an adult and he was 70.
Yeah.
And
Your age?
at a church function, he said, I would pick up, I'd listen to you. Well, we didn't. We were like, how are you? I am fine. What did you do today?
Yeah.
I went to town,
Yeah.
But he would listen to us on the storyline.
Yeah. Terry has mentioned that
You
happens
could kind of
too.
hear a click.
Right.
And if you were really careful when you picked up the receiver, they didn't hear it click. But if there was a click, they didn't know if it was the Kunzes or the Almonds or who it was.
The reception. Yeah. Even. Okay. Oh,
Anyway.
yeah.
So,
Well, that was interesting. You had that. You barely at the same time you had indoor plumbing.
yeah. And then I went to a one-room country schoolhouse.
Mm.
It was the same schoolhouse. Do I have to look at you, or where do I look? Any place?
Yeah. Right. You don't
Okay.
look right at the camera. I
Okay.
don't think. I'm kind of right. By
We
the
our Sibley Trail School was a very memorable school. All of the families in the community, the men had all gone to this little schoolhouse, and it was one-room country schoolhouse. It had a pot-bellied stove kind of almost in the middle of the room. That was the only heat, warped floors,
How many kids?
outdoor toilets. When I went, there were 7 children in the whole school, and I was the only one in my grade
Huh.
the first 8 years.
Were you valedictorian then?
Yeah, all of the above, and the dunce and all of it, yes.
Assume.
But I think back on that, Mrs. Kranz was our teacher. She was about 4'11", and her 2 sons they traveled all over the world. They were called Dynamite Master Blasters, like through the Alps with the Audubon. They helped build the tunnels.
Sure.
And so they would travel all over the world, and in the summer, they would fly her to where they were. They were in Cuba, did some work in Cuba. And her husband was just kind of an agoraphobia, alcoholic, stay-at-home guy.
Oh.
So they would fly her there, and they would buy her a new Cadillac every year, her sons.
Wow.
And she would strut around in platform, high shoes, big rings, and she had little tiny hands. Her rings were about a size 4. And she had flaming red hair, rosy cheeks, painted eyebrows, mascara, lashes that stuck together, and lots of red lips. And very kind of Dolly Parton-ish in her attire, always big bust and belt. And I thought she was a movie star.
Let me guess. Could that have had some influence on
Yes.
what the dynamic Sharon
Isn't it
Hilgers
crazy?
today? Yeah, it probably did.
So, but it was interesting with Mrs. And I cried because she died about 94 years old. And she, in my life, was probably one of my mentors.
Had you seen her after you left?
Oh, yeah, we
Quincy?
saw her in later years.
Okay.
Thanked her many times.
So 8 kids in the school.
7 children in the whole school.
But
I was the only one in my grade.
5
So
were
some had
Quincy's?
double. My sister Monica had Mark Wheeland in her grade. They were 3 years younger. So what I found interesting
But
with
5
her,
were Kunzis, though, right?
no, there were Almonds and Reedmans and Burgers.
Oh, where did your rest of your sisters go then?
Monica and I were the only 2 that went at that young
Okay.
age.
Okay.
My sister Monica and I. But it was interesting that these are some of the things that I remember about that school. So she would let me at recess. The other children have to go out and play. Think about this. I could put her shoes on and her rings.
What?
And sometimes her belts and her clip-on earrings. And I would strut around the classroom
You must
and
have
pretend
just
I was a
cracked up.
dancer.
Yeah. Oh,
Think about that as a teacher.
Yeah.
And so, but she got me. And it was just really cool.
Yeah. That's
And
awesome.
anyway, so she was very instrumental, and she would put me in these contests, like 4-H or speech contests and poetry contests,
Wow.
and I would win these contests.
You knew how to talk, even back then.
Anyway,
Surprised!
yeah. So
So she was she the one person who influenced your life the most, or were
I would
your
have to say
parents?
she was.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow.
So she and my mother really got along, and so our house was the snow house for her. And so it was wonderful when there were snow days. She would come and stay at our house, and we had registers. We were upstairs with registers. You could look down, like the
Okay.
heat would come up through registers. And Mother would make homemade rhubarb wine. They would literally sit at the dining room table, tell stories, and have rhubarb wine. And she would tell stories about all of these adventures she'd been all over the world with her sons.
Oh
But then she would tell those stories. She would bring those stories. I loved when school started in the fall because she would bring stories back to us of where she'd been with her sons. Her sons were very, very, very good to her, very successful.
Huh.
It was cool.
And she was married too?
Yeah, she was married to Walter.
Okay.
He was kind of a construction guy, but at that time, she was probably in her 50s when she taught at Sibley Trail School.
Right.
And Walter just sat home kind of in the dark all day. It was one of those deals.
Right, okay. Anything you regret not having asked your parents? Maybe what?
Well, the thing is, my mother and I, we had, my mother is one thing and my dad is one thing. My mother and I were very close, probably closer than my dad. My dad thought I was a handful. I was different than the rest of the other children because I wanted to explore. I had a curiosity. I wanted to see, go, do, be.
Yeah.
And that was a pain in my dad's side.
Right.
A little bit.
Okay.
God love him. But my mother, she would have us wash and sell eggs and do things, and like my cheerleading sweater and things at school, you know, she would do extra things also to get money. So not myself, but as children could have some extra things. We were very, very poor. I remember one time at Christmas in particular, all we got were those little tablets that you have a marker and you could draw on and you'd rip it up and start all over again. They were about this size.
Yeah.
And we got those in a pair of underpants, and that's all we got for Christmas.
Wow.
One thing I'm a little embarrassed about, when my girlfriend at Sibley Trail School, Donna Wheeland, she was a year younger than I was, and we were very close. And her family she was the youngest of about 13 children. And they just had a little more affluence, and she would get more things. And by then, her brothers and sisters were older and married and off at college. And she would get lots of presents.
Yeah.
And I remember one time I got that sketchy thing, was all I got, in a pair of underpants for Christmas. And I went to school after the holiday. Well, what'd you get for Christmas? Well, I got a bride doll, and I got ice skates, she said, and I got a baton, and I got all these things. Then I said, well, I got a baton too, and I got ice skates, and I got a bride doll, and I got all these things. I didn't get any of it. And she kind of found out. I mean, that was embarrassing. I remember that. I was about 8.
Yeah, well,
you know,
that happens.
So anyway,
that happens. You're a cheerleader, but any
I was a
sports?
cheerleader,
No?
and
Did they have sports for you?
Yes, well, I was in 4-H. 4-H,
Okay.
we had softball in 4-H. That was all my sisters and all the neighborhood kids. We were all in 4-H. Our neighbor Florence Wheeland was a 4-H leader, and her daughter was Mary Frances. And my mother was like her assistant leader for 4-H. And we played sports, and we learned so much in 4-H. When I think about it, we learned a little bit about a lot of things.
Yeah.
A lot of things. I ran track. I had the Barnes County record for many years for the 220-yard dash. Not today, but
Yeah. Well, maybe
and
it
I
holds
was a
forever
cheerleader.
because they don't do yard dashes
No.
anymore. It's meters.
Yeah, that was when I was in high school.
Huh. And your parents ever share any memories of the day, like when they were kids?
Oh yes, they did. You know, my dad was the youngest of 9, and his mother died when he was 12, and his dad died when he was 16. And he had a lot of older sisters. I mean, I think my dad's memories were probably they babied him a lot. These older siblings, sisters, because everybody felt sorry for him.
Yeah.
And he had a struggle, but
how did you buy the farm that you're at?
well, you know, back in the day, I don't know how we only owned about 600 acres.
It's pretty good.
Well, it's only how much is that in a section, Steve? A quarter of a section?
Yeah.
Steve?
Yeah.
And then we rented land from Svenningsons, the Mrs. Svenningson and stuff. We rented land.
Yeah.
And it would, you know, but then we had milk cows. We sold milk.
Okay.
And we had chickens, and we had pigs, and we had turkeys, and we had baby lambs. So on the farm, we had plenty to eat, and we would sew and make our clothes, and, you know, it was just, But one of my mother's memories was she was a middle child of 3, and my mother was really amazing. She was a lot like Lily Hilgers.
Oh, she? Yeah, I remember her.
They were very
so many
intelligent, hardworking women.
Yeah, yeah. She didn't work really outside the home, pretty much. Just
No, she was a homemaker. But what is interesting, then those years when she wanted to make extra money, the Barnes County had a newspaper, the Valley City Times Record, and each little township, they would have news like Sharon Kunze came home from college for this weekend, or so-and-so got engaged, or so-and-so went to Minneapolis for a big trip. And so my mother would sit in this old rocking chair, and we had to be quiet. She'd shake her fist sometime, or her wooden spoon, when we were too noisy, because she would have to call all the neighbors.
Oh.
And this isn't a childhood thing of hers, but this is a really cool memory of my mom.
Yeah.
And she would get so much a word or so much a line, it was minimal.
Yeah.
And she would put the Sibley Trail News, she was the contributor to the Barnes County Times Record newspaper. It was amazing. And I think these women she would speak to on the phone, I remember now as an adult, someone would cry and she would counsel them, and
Yeah.
one of them was having a difficult pregnancy,
Sure.
but she kept everything in confidence, always in confidence, those things.
See, that would have been, between wars, I would suspect. Certainly between.
Well, I was born in
Korean-
52. That would have been in the 60s. It was in the 60s.
Right. Well, maybe.
Yeah. It was before the Vietnam War.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, she would. I just remember. My sisters and I talked about that. How she would end up being this wonderful counselor to all these women.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
So you kind of a little bit of a fast forward, wanting to explore the world. What was your first big trip to the city? Was it Minot? Was it?
Well, we would get to go to Fargo. That was a really big trip for some school shopping, which was probably like not much, maybe some underwear and a dress and a pair of shoes.
Yeah.
And we would get to go to King Leo's.
Oh yeah.
15-cent hamburgers. Yeah. That was a big deal to get to go to King Leo's.
Yeah.
Big deal. My first plane ride. So I graduated from high school, and all of my classmates were going to go to like North Dakota State University or Wahpeton, and they were all going to go east. And I wanted to go. I wanted to go to Moorhead State, but it was out of state tuition back then, and I couldn't afford it. And our dad paid for 1 year of school for us all, which was a real big sacrifice since we didn't have much money.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so I went to Bismarck Junior College, which is now Bismarck State College in Bismarck, North Dakota, for a couple of years. It was wonderful.
Do you remember?
Yeah, well, business.
Okay, business. Yeah.
And I was a cheerleader there.
So you went there 2 years, and then went.
I went there 2 years, and then my girlfriend Judy Lowen, my best college girlfriend in the dorm from Hazen, North Dakota, we decided, she had 2 aunts who lived in Salem, Oregon, and we were going to get the heck out of North Dakota, both her and I. We couldn't wait, see the world, get out of there. And so we went to, we moved when we turned 21, not quite 21. We moved to Oregon.
Wow.
And we enrolled in school out there. My mother was devastated. She thought sure I would be murdered.
Oh, yeah.
She was
so naive from
big trip, and that was
easy North Dakota.
And I remember, Judy and Hazen was about a couple hundred miles or so west of us, outside of Bismarck way. And so my mother and dad drove us there. Myself, Judy had the car. Her dad bought her a car, and that we had. And they stayed overnight, and I remember them talking about us. We were up in bed. We could hear them talking about they were scared about us, and they prayed for us and all those things. And my dad gave me a $50 bill, which was really a lot of money in 1972.
Yeah.
He gave me I'll never forget that. He gave me a $50 bill.
Good luck, and off you went.
Good luck. I think Dad was like, "See ya."
Oh, yeah.
Right when you
were
find
the
work.
Problem child.
Yeah.
Okay. $50 is cheap.
One less mouth to feed, No, not really. But yeah, that's how it was. It was a great adventure. Rock, Socks, and Other Stops. That was going to be the book we were always going to read. Judy and I, we would walk a lot. Rocks, socks in your shoes, and other stops, and you'd stop to either go potty or Rock, Socks, and Other Stops. It's always going to be the book we were going to write about our travel adventures.
Speaking of clothes, I guess, segue into that. What do you remember on clothes that they don't have any today, what you wore in high school?
Oh, I have to tell you. So my mother, I'm going to go back a little bit. The 4-H thing, my mother got me, and she crocheted a lot. I wish I had this. I would find patterns, and this was the 70s. Was kind of, disco inferno
Hippie,
days, a little bit of hippie. And she crocheted for me a royal blue, like a bulky jacket down to my hips. It had sleeves. It was a big, bulky, cool, bright blue. It took her days and days to crochet that. And I had it for a number of years, and then I think when we moved to Australia, I got rid of it.
Yeah.
I wish I had it today.
Yeah.
I don't even have a photograph of it. I feel bad about that.
Yeah.
But so, my sister Monica was probably the real hippie. I was probably the dancing queen.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you this. When I was 13, they had dances in Daisy, and they would have bands, and they had a dance competition. And most of these were for older high school kids. And my twin sisters, Jean and Jane, would have to drag me along. I don't know how all that worked. I think I begged Mother, and she would say, you take her along too.
Really?
Yes, and roller skating on Sunday nights at Sibley.
You didn't like to do that? You didn't like
I
to
liked to
dance?
go. I liked to go, but I was young, and I got to go with my sisters who were 3 years older than me.
Okay.
When I was 13, they were 16. They had to drag their 13-year-old sister along.
Okay. Drag. Are we really? You wanted to go, but
I wanted
they
to
thought,
go,
heck,
and I got to go.
Got to bring her along.
Yes, it was interesting. I
So
don't
that's
know
how
all that
Sophia
worked.
got all her dancing talent. Was probably
Adriana,
from
yeah.
Grandma. Adriana.
Adriana.
But
And I won a dance contest. I remember that.
what age?
I was 13.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Could have gone on American Bandstand with Dick
Yeah,
Clark.
it was really fun. And we had lots of dances, loved to dance. But we had a lot of fun skating. Roller skating on Sunday nights at Sibley Resort was a big deal. I mean, you could probably go there. I probably started going there. There were Sunday afternoons, but Sunday nights was for the big kids.
Okay.
And it was like 6 to 10 maybe.
Hmm.
And I started to go there, I think it was about 13.
And I'm guessing Dad especially, maybe Mom too, concerned about dating. Remember?
Yes,
when
my dad, he was a tyrant. I remember from roller skating, Tom Arbuckle, 7th grade. I was 13, maybe 8th grade. And we used to roller skate together, nothing more. And he wrote me a letter that Dad intercepted in the mailbox.
Oh my.
But it was, how are you? I am fine. What did you do today?
Oh.
I went to town with my dad, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really got spanked for that, really hard.
Did you?
Mhm.
Just for a letter from a boy that unsolicited?
Yeah, Dad was hard on us.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well.
My siblings
Little
see
too
this. Yeah,
young.
he would spank us hard and
Yeah.
use rulers and things. Mm-hmm.
That's what happened.
But
back
you
then.
have to keep order.
Yeah.
When you have a wild child, what are you gonna do? Gotta keep order somehow.
But the other girls were pretty much.
Well,
Stay close.
Jane was naughty. Jane would get in mischief. I mean, Jane's story. She dated Rich when she was about 15, and they've been married now.
Yeah.
52 years or 53 years.
Wow.
Yeah, she wouldn't really go roller skating. They'd go parking.
Yeah.
So we had to cover for her, those sorts
Sure.
of things. Jean was a little bit of a goody two-shoes. But I had to kiss up to her and be on her good side. Now, we'd do some of her chores for her, so she'd take me along.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we'd barter things. Monica? I don't know what Monica did. She
Sure.
did throw up on me one time with some blueberry dessert in bed with me. She doesn't eat blueberries to this day.
Oh my.
I remember that.
Huh.
When we were up in that north room sharing that little tiny full-size bed.
I'm guessing
Lots of barf, blueberry barf.
with 4 girls, you probably got in trouble wearing your older sister's clothes. Or didn't you do that?
Yeah,
too much?
yeah, we were kind of, yes, we did. We never had much. I always felt sorry for myself because I would look at the Sears catalogs or the Montgomery Ward catalogs and I would circle things.
Yeah.
Like we would have days of the week underpants. You'd have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, labeled on them.
Yeah.
Like little, yeah, I never got those. I get hand-me-downs, bras, hand-me-down underpants. It wasn't that bad, but
Yeah.
it kind of was.
That's what you knew back then. That's what.
Use bicycles.
were the
But that's how it was.
Yeah.
Dad would fix the bicycles and put a set of tires on, and the next kid would get them.
Yeah.
So it's just the way it was.
So you got a gravel road right out front?
Gravel road.
That's gonna-
My mother's mother and dad were very elderly at that time in my world. They had a little tiny house in Valley City. And my grandma had a lot of health issues and was in a lot of pain, so she was kind of grumpy. And I think I was probably a little boisterous, and I know I was. And so she would send us outside, and for some reason we would haul that bicycle to Valley City. And riding on concrete sidewalks was a big deal.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
And we're drawing chalk on concrete sidewalks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, hopscotch?
Yep.
That was a really big deal.
Huh.
At my Grandma Bessie's house. A very big deal.
How far was Valley City from?
20 miles.
20 miles. And you'd see them how often?
You know, well, my mother was very good to her parents, really good. Oh, I don't know, at least once a week probably. You know, go get groceries and things like that.
Okay.
Sometimes my mother and dad go to town when we were at school, but I'll just tell you a scary story. My dad had a lot of talents, but he wasn't a good electrician. And I wanted a bed lamp. My friend Donna, the one of 13 children that had bride dolls and batons, the real deal, I just lied about it. She had a bed lamp, and I like to read in bed. And so my dad found somewhere some old lamp at I don't know, the neighbors, and he decides to rewire this lamp. It was in the middle of winter. My dad was at Sodbusters, which was a men's club. My mother was up late typing a Christmas letter. I could hear the typing in the dining room. We were all in bed, and I had turned this lamp on. I was so excited to get this bed lamp that my dad had fixed up for me on this iron bed. We had iron full-size beds, old beds, and old mattresses, old lumpy mattresses. And I'm almost asleep, and I hear this bzz, 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 bzz by my head where the lamp was. And I get out of bed because it's getting like louder. I don't think Monica was, that's right, Monica was sick, so she slept down on the couch that night. When you were sick, you got to sleep on the couch in the living room. And I stood up, and it was like the 4th of July. These sparks just spewed across the room. And I might have been 8 or 9. I screamed. It was awful. My sisters woke up, and my mattress had started on fire at the head of the bed. And my brother Dale and my other brother were sleeping in the other boy's bedroom, and he came and he pulled that mattress down these stairs and out the door into the snowbank.
Wow.
But it was really scary. I thought about that a long time as a child growing up.
Yeah. And then you had to
So much for my dad's
mattress.
electrician. He tried.
Yeah, that's some power coming through there. It's not.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Something shorted out.
Huh.
He probably had a 110 with a 220, or who knows? Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah.
Something
Not
was.
the cold.
It was hot wired somehow.
Wow.
Literally hot. Anyway.
So then, go ahead.
So I go to college, and it was really, really fun. Bismarck Junior College, and I stayed in the dorm. Met some really good friends. I had kind of a sad experience. My brother Dale on the farm, he and my brother Riney had gone. We had to help put the crop in and stuff, all my sisters, because my 2 brothers, they were 10 years older than me and about 7 years older than me. And they had gone over the road when they were building interstates and freeways with construction work. And my brother came back, Dale, and my brother Riney had met Sandy in Iowa. And they ended up settling in Iowa. But my brother Dale purchased in 1966, let's see, it was a brand new bright blue Mustang car. Brand spanking new, whatever year that was. And I was in college. That must have been 22. I was 20. It was in 72. 71, actually. And so I went home, and he let me take it back to school for a week at the end of the school year.
Oh, my.
It was a big deal. And Mary College was another college in town, a Catholic university, and they would have great dances and great bands. And 4 of us girls from the dorm, and I was the driver. And one of the girls, her older sister, got the beer. We were not 21, we were 20. And I was driving. We had a 6-pack of beer in the back seat, and we went over this kind of knoll of this road. And coming at us was this drunken, swervy driver, and he hit my brother, hit our car.
Wow.
And he hit on the on the driver's back seat, my friend, and she was hurt she was in the hospital about a month, broken jaw, broken bones,
No seatbelt.
and we went into, no seatbelts, and we went into this embankment, this ditch. We didn't roll though. And one of the girls had it took a while for the cops to get there. No cell phones. I mean,
No.
people, I don't know. Someone saw it happen. I don't know. And one of the girls took the 6-packs. I had not had any beer. Yeah, I was driving, but I had one open but hadn't consumed it. I remember that.
Right.
And she chucked it over a deeper embankment down. But the car smelled like beer and everything. The police never did anything about it.
Okay.
But this other guy, he had a rap sheet. He was naughty, and we had to go to court, and I had to give, what do you call that?
Testimony?
When they... Deposition.
Okay.
And he was charged, and we didn't, but it totaled my brother's car.
Well,
That's very
insurance,
sad.
I guess, but
And, and he was sweet, and I'd call him, and was anybody hurt? Well, my friend was not critically, but hurt, but...
yeah.
And he never got a new car again. He took the money and never bought a new car.
Wow.
Mm-mm. I've always felt bad about that.
Did he ever let you borrow a car?
No. Even though it wasn't my fault. I just felt bad.
Yeah.
What
time of day was that?
It was at evening. We were going to a dance. It was dark. It was in
So it was dark. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I remember that guy just came right at us. He was swerving and came at us over this, two-way road.
Any other car accidents you've been involved with through the years? Speeding tickets?
I was with a boy one time at skate. Yes, I was with a boy at the roller skating, and you'd always sit next to the boy in the middle, and I don't know. We were maybe going to go park. I'm not so sure. And I thought he knew these roads. I didn't know these roads. It wasn't that far from the skating facility, and it was a dead end. And we went and hit the the embankment. It's like a T in the road, and he went straight off the T. I remember that. And my head, this is my dad. My dad hit the center windshield and it cracked. His steering wheel stopped him. We weren't going that fast. And so somehow, my dad I would have been maybe 16 then.
Yeah.
But the fact that he knew I was sitting next to that boy, because that's where the windshield was cracked.
Wow.
I think I got spanked for that too.
Huh.
I would have.
Yeah, I was really a handful for my dad. I didn't really do anything.
Yeah.
I just had bigger dreams, and that you kind of wanted to squelch them quite a bit.
Didn't want to live your life in daisy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And my mother encouraged me.
So then you went from Bismarck to Moorhead?
I didn't go to Moorhead State. I wanted to go. And then we went to Eugene, Oregon, and drove out to Eugene. We had so much fun.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting story. So we rented a little tiny apartment, 1 bedroom with bunk beds. And we were poor college kids. And my mother and dad, they took a trip. My mother wanted to come out to Oregon because she had some cousins in Portland. And so they did this trip to see us. We hadn't been out there very long. And Judy and I slept in sleeping bags on the floor in the living, and we gave Mom and Dad our bunk bed to sleep in. And Dad slept on the bottom bunk, which was my bunk, and my mother slept on Judy's bunk, the top bunk. And anyway, my mother was really, and we'd been out there maybe, I don't know, 4 months, 6 months, I don't remember. We went out there in the fall, and it was in the spring, so before planting season.
This way.
Oh, okay. And so my dad had been sleeping in my bed, and his mother died when he was 12. And when my middle name was Johanna, Sharon Johanna. And when Johanna died at our little St. Mary's cemetery, she was buried for many, many years. And then they had to move the cemetery because they were building this road, and all the resident locals took their dead out of and removed the cemetery.
Right.
And Donna Whelans, my friend from Sibley Trail, her dad, Whitney, was help digging up my grandma Johanna's grave.
Yep.
And it was just like the day they had buried her.
Oh.
The rose on her chest hadn't even withered. She'd been dead, I don't know, 60 years by then.
Wow.
Well, he was 12, and many, many years. I don't know where I was going with this subject.
Well, in Bismarck, and your dad.
Oh, and so my dad was sleeping in my bed in Eugene, Oregon.
Right.
In my bunk. And he woke up in the morning. My mother had gotten up earlier with him, and we were still, and he just had this glow about him. And my dad struggled, I think, a little bit with depression sometimes. And sometimes he was happy and sometimes he wasn't, and we just dealt with it.
A lot of
But
pressure. Yep.
yeah, you know, but he just was radiant. And I remember they both came out into the living room, and it was just this. He was just jubilant, and his mother, Johanna, had appeared to him in my bed.
Wow.
She tapped him on the shoulder and she called him Little Philip.
Wow.
He was always Little Philip.
Huh.
And she tapped him on the shoulder and she called him Little Philip. And he woke up. And she appeared to him. And she said, "Don't worry, Little Philip. I'll always take care of your Sherry."
Oh, wow. That's cool.
And it's been interesting. I don't have a lot of fear in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I try not to make foolish decisions.
Yeah.
But I've never been a fearful person.
Yeah, that's good.
Sometimes I think my curiosity, it can get you in trouble, or I think there has to be a positive way to fix this, a problem solver.
Yeah.
And I think it's not being fearful, but you address the problem. Every problem is fixable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, I think it's a pretty cool
That's
story.
cool. So you growing up as a religious family, going to church every Sunday?
Oh
or
yes,
not?
our social life was our Catholic church around
wow.
St. Mary's Catholic Church.
Okay.
And we, it's funny you bring that up. It was a small community. I mean, 7 of us all that at the country school all went to St. Mary's Catholic Church.
Right.
It was
Keep going.
Steve.
Yeah.
It was just memorable. You know, all the All Saints Day, All Souls Day, and we would go to midnight mass, and we'd have mass twice. We'd have it in English, and then turn around in Latin.
Really?
So we children have to sit through 2 masses in a row. Painful.
Yeah.
And the choir, they would sing in Latin. The men's choir,
Yeah.
and they would practice at Donna Whelan's, my Sibley Trail friends. They were next door to the church, so they kind of did the lawn and stuff. But my mother would do most of the priests, like the linens and the garments and stuff, and iron them, and we had to do a lot of that.
Okay.
Starching and ironing the priests' garbs.
Huh.
A lot, the altar cloths and all of those things. And we would take turns cleaning the church. Yeah, the Catholic Church was a very, very, very big part of our life. Our decorations around our house were the Holy Family, the Blessed Mother, crosses. That was our home decor. And we would have to kneel down and pray the rosary every night before we could watch Bonanza. Yeah, every night. We'd kneel down.
Yeah.
And we milked cows, and we sold milk. And then we had the milk for our house was a pasteurizer. It was like a 2-gallon thing. You'd plug it in, it would pasteurize the milk that we would consume. And so the reason I bring that up is it would have a buzzer that would always go off during the rosary, and we would race to get up off of our knees and go unplug the buzzer. And then you'd maybe have to go potty, do other things when the rosary was half over with.
Okay.
Before you'd have to go kneel down again in the dining room.
Yeah.
Yeah, we knelt on our knees every night.
Wow. Wow. That's.
Lots of prayer. My mother and dad were very, very, very prayerful. My dad actually, I was in Eugene, Oregon, and my dad had a heart attack. I would have been spring of, so anyway, I had to kind of quit school and leave work, and my brothers were gone, my sisters were all busy, and I had to come home and help my mother put the crop in because my dad was very ill.
Right.
And
What age would he have been at that point?
Well, let me
65,
think.
60?
So if I was 20, he was born in 12, and this would have been like, let's say 72.
60s, yeah.
60s. And because he died at 73 of a heart attack in his sleep.
Okay.
And my mother died at 65 of leukemia. They didn't live real long. That's another story.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I came home to put the crop in, and I had met Steve earlier, right before I moved to Eugene, Oregon, the first time with Judy. I had met Steve, and he was at my sister Gina Wayne Welly's wedding dance. The Wellies do the Hilgers.
Yeah.
And so and I had met Steve, and I put the crop in, and I was going to stay home for at least 2 months because my sister Jean was getting married the end of May. So I was home like April and May. That year she was going to marry Wayne. And anyway, while I'm home, and I used to live in Fargo with my sister Jean and Gloria Welly and Bobby Stallman. 4 of us lived in an apartment. Fun.
It was.
Before I moved to Oregon, and I wasn't 21 yet. And anyway, we all kind of met at the wedding and just had lots of fun. And Steve and I kind of rekindled. And when I was home for those 2 months, I met Mary Jo, who I used to work with at Buttrey's, which was a woman's fashion store. And when West Acres first opened in 1972, when it was a muddy road to get there, I was one of the part-time employees at this Buttrey's, this women's clothing store at West Acres. Used to be downtown Fargo, and then it moved to West Acres.
Okay.
Steve would come out and see me. He'd bring me a Coke.
Oh, big
Steve.
spender.
I remember you'd pop out and see me. But anyway, my friend Mary Jo Sherlin, who had kind of worked at Buttrey's back in the day.
Right.
So I'm home, and my girlfriend Judy in Oregon was going to transfer to Portland to college.
Okay.
So I was going to go back to Eugene, Oregon. Well, it was kind of she was moving on, and I didn't know what I was going to do with my dad, that whole thing.
Sure.
With my dad being sick, I thought I'd have to stay back in North Dakota. So we gave up this apartment. And my friend Mary Jo Sherlin, I ran into her, and she's moving to San Francisco. She went to the University of Wisconsin at Madison, and her girlfriend from college she was going to move to San Francisco with bailed out, met a boyfriend, got engaged, wanted to get married. And she called me, and I moved to San Francisco.
Oh, gosh.
And anyway, Steve gave me a little send-off the night before I left because we kind of rekindled, and I got pregnant with John.
Oh, there we are.
So we moved to San Francisco and lived there, and that was interesting. I will tell one thing there. So we lived in Pacific Heights, Mary Jo and I, in a little tiny apartment that was affordable then. It's a very high class, expensive place now.
Okay.
And I worked in Embarcadero 1 down by the wharf, 23rd floor.
Wow.
Moved there.
Cool.
It was a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
That was my second day on the job. I'm bouncing around a little bit, but my second day on the job working there at Embarcadero 1, my coffee cup danced across my desk, and they had earth tremors all the time. And so I got up out of my chair and kind of made a scene. I was new. They all laughed at me because it happens all the time. Yeah. And then I just got used to it. Things that move
Sharon
around.
From
Tremors.
North Dakota just doesn't really fit.
Yes. I will tell you then, so there was a guy that lived in our apartment building, Brian Lansborough. He was quite a bit older than us. He took a liking to me, and we went on a couple of dates, nothing big. He was so narcissistic. And he was a screenplay writer, and one of his things he boasted about was going to be sold to Disney. And I was a little, sure. And years later, we're back from Australia, and Sarah is 4. We're on a snowy Sunday night. Steve and I are watching TV, and this Disney movie came on. It's about this cow parachutes out of a plane, lands on top of a train. It was a kid's silly movie, and I know what's going to happen next in this movie. And Steve's like, yeah. And here it was. The screenplay writer was Brian Lansborough.
Wow.
And we're
You
home.
read a screenplay then?
Well, it got sold to Disney. His movie stuff got sold to
Sure.
Disney. Years later.
Wow.
I mean, that was quite a while later.
Yeah.
It was a really weird karma. And also in San Francisco, the Reverend Jim Jones, the Jonestown massacres. So I was always Catholic, always went to church, and I worked with this Asian guy, and we were just like good buddies. And he knew he was spiritual, and I liked black music, gospel music, loved that kind of music. And he said, there is a church that I'm going to take you to that's dark. It's not Christian. You just have to go and experience it. Yeah. So we got there. We had to get there 2 hours early. And some of the members of Sly and the Family Stone played there that day. It was in a big auditorium in San Francisco called the People's Church. And people were hanging from the rafters in this music, and it was rocking. It was very euphoric. And he had warned me about that. And then Angela Davis spoke that day. And then the Reverend Jim Jones came on with his garments, and it was not even scriptural based. It was worshiping him. It was a very, I remember feeling really sad that all these people were being misled.
Oh.
And then Steve and I, when we got married, moved to Australia. All those people, he had poisoned them. They drank the poison in the Jonestown
Kool-Aid,
massacre.
yeah.
Or the Kool-Aid.
It was,
I was probably from here to, I don't know, really, because we had front row seats, maybe one of those big trees away from
But
them.
it was more of a black experience?
Mostly,
But
well,
yet-
there were a lot of black people there, but it was multiracial.
Okay.
But
It
he-
seems like a
he
different
cut-
mix
he's-
with Sly and the Family Stone and Jim Jones, but
Yeah, well, there was music. I mean, they'd bring all these bands, and
Yeah.
there was a lot of money in the church, and you would just,
Right.
you know, I think these guys just played a gig.
Yeah.
It happened to be the service.
Yeah.
And they weren't a part of the church.
Okay.
So it was very interesting to experience that. And I remember when, you know.
So what year would you have been in San Fran, and what was the political climate kind of?
Oh yeah,
dicey
liberal. Haight Ashbury.
Yeah.
But you know, and I rode the trolley cars to work. Or I mean, that's just how, or I would ride the bus, but it was more fun to ride the trolley cars.
Oh.
We'd ride through Chinatown. One day I rode to work, and you know, we're up in these hills, and it's up and down hills.
Yeah.
My calf muscles were very developed. Everybody's calf muscles in San Francisco are very developed because you walk up and down hills.
Sure.
And one time the brakes went out on our trolley car. I remember that. That was
Oh my.
crazy. And it kind of went off the tracks. Anyway, it was in Chinatown, and chickens and roosters and Asian people that were scrambling. It was, and then we ended up hitting like a light pole to stop it.
Oh.
It was, I remember that was interesting.
Yeah. Disaster wherever we go.
Another time, this Brian Lansborough, the screenplay Disney writer, he took me, he knew I liked music, and he took me to an airplane hangar over the bridge in Tiburon from San Francisco. I mean, it was like an indoor Coachella, indoor concert.
Wow.
I mean, Jimi Hendrix made an appearance later, only briefly, like unannounced, happened to be, but it was a very, I never did drugs. I think I was so Catholic, I really was afraid I'd go to hell if I did anything wrong
Right.
with that.
Disappoint your parents.
Yes, when I think about it, they really taught us to make good choices, pretty good choices most of the time. And I remember being there to experience it, but I wanted to leave. It was not, it was a really,
Felt dark.
it was just a drug, music and psychedelic Janis Joplin kinds of things and heavy acid rock stuff.
Yeah.
It was amazing to be there, but
Uh-huh.
let's see, one time I was in a restaurant. Oh my God, who was that NFL football player? Mary Jo and I. Oh, I can't think. I can see his face. NFL football player and his buddy. They came on to us. I can see his face. I remember that. That's another story that was in San Francisco. It was interesting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you're
And
there. You're there. How many months? And you go.
And then I
"Oh,
remember I
gotta
got my
start."
first American Express card because the bank I worked for had a tie-in with American Express, and they gave me an American Express card. So here I am, this young girl with an American Express card. That was weird. You know, credit cards. It was just a weird
Yeah.
to experience that. I mean, I remember people wrote checks for our rent and
Yeah.
checks for everything in San Francisco. It was just interesting
Yeah. That's
back in the day.
right. It just didn't seem.
Because I worked for an affiliate that we did like their accounting or something. I don't know what it was. It was a big, Pacific Bank. Pacific Bank. We were part of that affiliation.
Yeah.
So that was my San Francisco experience. And Steve and Mark Clausen came to see me there.
Yeah.
And I wasn't very nice to Steve
Mhm.
at the time. It was just a weird time in my life.
You were aware that you.
I was not
got
aware.
Pregnant?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay.
I was not aware I was pregnant.
All right.
I wasn't aware of it.
And you just felt you wanted to be.
Well, I wanted to go see and do everything.
Yeah.
I wanted to experience everything.
Yeah.
And all my mother did was worry about me because I'm in San Francisco and you see things on the news. And
Oh yeah.
But we had a good head on our shoulders. Mary Jo and I lived in a little apartment. We lived in a safe neighborhood, and it was really interesting.
Yeah.
But when I lived there, it's one of those things. When you imagine you're going to live in a big city and do all this la-di-da, and when you live there, it's a hassle.
Yeah.
Buying a quart of milk is a hassle. Everything's a hassle.
Yeah.
Hassle. Everything's a hassle.
Well, you've been able to handle yourself in a big city. Tell this story here about the robber that you happened to see. And where was that? What city was that in?
We were in Dallas, Texas, at a national real estate conference at the Wyndham Atoll, which was a 5-star hotel back in the day, big conference center.
Hmm.
And Betty Vanderstein was one of my colleagues, wonderful girl in our office. She was older than I, and she just had another grandchild, and she just, her husband was Dr. Vanderstein. It was John Holmgren's dermatologist, John Holmgren.
Oh.
And Paul just died. Dr. Vanderstein just died. In fact, we're going to his funeral June 17th in Hudson, Wisconsin. Anyway, and so we're having breakfast and we're going to be leaving. So our convention is leaving, and there's a convention coming in this big skylit lobby in this open air gorgeous restaurant. It was really lovely, and we're all dressed up, and I'm in high heels, and we had a couple of hours before we had to exit to the airport, and we're having breakfast, and Betty had opened her purse, showed me her grandchildren, and she put her wallet back in her purse by her leg, but didn't zip her purse. And anyway, but the tables were spaced quite a bit apart. And this other real estate agent who we had befriended at this conference, her name was also Betty from Connecticut. She actually saw it happen. We had greeted her. She's sitting at her table over there with her friends, and we're here. And Betty from Connecticut came running over. We thought she was choking. She couldn't even speak.
Wow.
She was like, Betty. And Sharon. And she had seen this guy take her wallet out of her purse and slide away. And she looks and here are these masses of people in this massive lobby. She goes, and he had a red baseball cap on, Ralph Lauren baseball cap. And she went, there he is. And my chair tipped over, and I went running, and I liked Betty. I thought, how dare someone? She's the kindest, sweetest grandma, wonderful woman. And so I did my
Took off your shoes?
Kept my shoes on.
Oh.
I was about 5'10" or 11 with those heels on, pushing people out of my way, and he was way almost out the door. And I was hollering at him and screaming and pushing people, and he turned around and saw me, and he was a little dark. He was from Colombia, South America.
Okay.
Or Caracas, Venezuela, actually. A short little man, dark-skinned man. And then I grabbed his arm. He still had his baseball cap on, and he pushed me away like this, strong. And then he ran off darting again, and I continued to press on toward the door. Big limousines in this big half-round driveway, turnstile, big fancy doors, and then the other single doors with leaded glass. Well, I grabbed him again before he went out this side door, and then I said to the bellman, get him a wallet, screaming, make a noise. And so now we go out in this covered canopy, big half-round limousine driveway, and I caught him again. And then he hit me again. Now he threw the wallet in the bushes, and his hat ran, and so some businessmen helped me in the pursuit of him.
Yeah.
We made a scene.
Okay.
And we chased him down this driveway, and then the bellman, out of nowhere, came this 6'10" big African security guard man, and he just came out of nowhere and just skidded his face on the pavement. I mean, like, just pounced on this kid. And so I had gone to pick up his wallet as he was throwing this, and then his hat had come off in the pursuit. And then this big man had tackled him, and then I picked up the hat, and he was kind of down like this, and he laid, and he was all bloody, and I was just mad. And he looked at me and like, me no do it, and I went, God damn it, yes you did! And I took his hat and threw it in his face, and anyway, it was very exciting. And then they hauled him off to some back security office room. Now they take Betty and I to we're sitting in the size of a bathroom, a little tiny office.
Right.
And he was bloody. And I made a scene to whoever seated us there. And Betty was pretty shook up, but she's more quiet and reserved. She'd be like your mother, like Lily. She's very much like Lily. And I said, I don't want to be in the same room with that asshole, blah, 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 blah. And then they took him out of the neck and put him out of the next room. And they interviewed him and me and this. Well, by then, they had a limo to take Betty and I, because I think our other party had gone on, I think.
Okay.
They didn't even know what happened. And they took us to the airport, and it was April Fool's Day. And Betty was most appreciative. And so we got on the airplane, And I got home, and Steve picks me up, and he thought it was an April Fool's joke. Remember, Steve? I started crying. No, and Betty went, no, it was just awful. And somehow the Fargo Forum got a hold of it, and I was on the front page of the Forum the next day.
Holding your
They
red
called
shoe
me.
or something?
Somebody in the Forum newspaper called me late that night. Called me and wanted the story. And they
Still
called
have the
Betty.
article?
And they called Betty too. Vanderstein gave it her.
Still have the article?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
I don't know if I probably saw it. I don't remember it.
Yeah. It was a long time ago, Gary.
Yeah. What was the best age of your life?
Well, I think the best thing I ever did was marrying Steve. That was by far the best decision I made.
Yeah.
The best day, probably. I mean, our children. That's you love your children, you love your life.
Yeah.
Living in Australia was really utopia for us.
Okay.
It was really, really a wonderful time. It is interesting how God works in mysterious ways. We had John, and I loved Steve, but I wasn't gonna be. I had 2 sisters that had to get married. A number of girls in our little Catholic community all had to get married. And it wasn't gonna be me.
Yeah.
Not that I didn't care for Steve. I mean, I used to cry about this, and now you kind of, as you get older, you develop I don't want to say hardened, but it just was, Steve really, really wanted to marry me, and the letters he wrote to me, and he really has always loved me. He chased me around for 3 years, and we finally got married. But had we not had John, I think there were times when I was living in Oregon and in San Francisco thinking I was living this dream life. But you're working and you're doing that, not really doing much, but you're in a big city and you go to music concerts, that I hadn't seen Steve for many, many months. Actually, this is even before I got pregnant. I would wake up and I would he would appear to me in dreams. Steve Hilgers, Moorhead, Minnesota. And that's not doing other things in my life. It was a God thing. He had that effect on him. It was really a God thing, though.
Yeah. Oh wow.
And I think God has a way of, he'll give you a little snap, and he'll tap you on the shoulder. He'll go, Sharon, whatever it might be in your life, a decision. He'll go, Sharon, and you don't listen to whatever it is. That we all have little signs from God in our lives that we maybe ignore, or we think we know how things should be, and that's not always what is good for us. And so he hit me beside the head, and I got pregnant with John. Biggest blessing ever other than marrying Steve, the biggest, other than having Sarah and Natalie. But had we not had John, we would not be married today.
Wow. 3 years. I didn't know it was that long. Steve, you were relentless. Yeah.
And then we had John. He was born February 7th. This is kind of a cool story. I had a great pregnancy. I didn't go to the doctor until I was 6 months pregnant. Denial.
Okay.
And anyway, Oregon at the time had midwives. We didn't have them in the Midwest, but they were pretty forward thinking in even their liberalism back in the day. And Judy and I went to a non-denominational Bible study at the university back then. And Pastor Mike Hilty was a youth pastor at a big Baptist church, and his wife Christy. And we got to know them really well. Really, we'd go and cook at their house, or we'd babysit their little 3-year-old. She was pregnant again with a son. We got really just close to them. And we were a little older. We weren't 18. And they really helped me a lot. I was pregnant as an unwed mother, but I was, 22, and they really helped me with a lot of things. A lot of things. And Steve wanted to marry me, and I loved him, but I wasn't ready to be a mother. And I knew we had several children in our little St. Mary's Catholic community. One was Florence Whelan, our 4-H leader. Her daughter Mary Frances was adopted. They lived right down the road from us. And Mary Frances was adopted, and some other children. Not that I had a bad life, because I didn't. Just a different life. And those children, Mary was like the holy grail in that household. Her and her brother Tommy were both adopted. And I would see that. I mean, they just, well, first of all, probably more materials. They got wonderful presents and got to take vacations. But we were milking cows. We couldn't afford to get away.
Right.
And I saw that as adoption, to be adopted, you were really held in high esteem.
Yeah.
And I think that had a little bit to do with at least my decision that John would have a really, really, really good life. And for his, so I don't want to say it was sacrificial, but I know, and I think Steve and I talked about it, and I'm not sure Steve was ready. I don't know him back then either.
Yeah.
It was just, he was teaching in Cottage Grove.
Yep.
And I was living in Oregon, and John was born. And back in the day, my mother, it was expensive to talk on the phone. We had little egg timers. Mother would set hers and I'd set mine. It was like $2 a minute to talk on the phone. Yeah. And so it was very easy to hide my situation. And my dad, his personality changed a lot after he'd had that heart attack. And he was very, 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 very hard on my mother. And I couldn't do that to my mom.
Yeah.
Took a pregnancy on her back then. It would have been, so it was just easier, but it was also really lonely. Like, Steve was in Cottage Grove. He was as supportive as he could be, but I didn't tell him till I was 6 months pregnant. And my girlfriend Judy was a wonderful girlfriend, but she kind of had a boyfriend. Back then, you didn't really go live with them, but you'd go stay with them.
Yeah.
That's just naughty. That's how it was. So she was kind of not around a lot, just the way it was. And so Mike and Christy Hilty, this youth minister and his wife, were very, very kind to me. And what is interesting, when I found out I was pregnant, I had a meeting with them, and they set me up with the doctor, and Mike set me up with the attorney that orchestrated the adoption.
Right.
That was interesting. So I had a 3-hour meeting with him regarding Steve's and your genetics, your level of intelligence, your physical characteristics, your history. And I remember that vividly. And that I was falling in love with Steve as I was telling about him, even more.
Yeah.
But I was pregnant, and it was just still the decision to adopt. I just remember that. And kind of fast forward 6 weeks after John was born, I went back to my doctor for a 6 weeks checkup. So the pastor, the doctor, and the attorney, they're all college buddies.
Okay.
They all knew each other from way back. And the physician told me that the attorney, after he met me and the 3-hour meeting about Steve and I, he wanted to adopt our son. But because he had met me, the laws wouldn't allow it. And he even went to the Supreme Court judge in Portland to see if he could get around that. And that was,
wow.
We've got pretty good DNA.
Yeah.
Really do.
That's
cool. And they wouldn't let him because he'd met me.
Interesting.
And anyway, midwives. Anne was my midwife, and she just died 6 months ago. I just looked her up. She was my midwife, and she was probably 33, single, and I was 22, and we became good friends. And so the night I went into labor at the hospital, she could have lost her job for this, and she said she could lose her job for this. But because I went into labor and he was born about 1:30 in the morning, and I was on the phone with Steve, and it would have been, 2:30 Cottage Grove time.
Okay.
No, 3:30, 2 hours. And anyway, she let me hold John, and I held him for about 2 hours. I mean, I used to cry now. It's almost like it's somebody, John is such a part of our life now. It's almost like it's somebody else's story.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of tears and emotion, and I wrote a long, many, many pages. She brought me a legal pad notebook, and I wrote like 5 or 6 pages to the adoptive parents about this gifting of our son John.
Right.
To them, and how.
Did they ever keep those?
Yeah, that was sad. We met them. We met the parents.
Yeah.
Yeah, that didn't go well.
Right.
Anyway, and so she was going to bring John back, before all the administrative executives came in to the hospital to work that day, she had this all figured out. She was going to bring him back in, and I could meet him again and say farewell at 6 o'clock in the morning before they all came in at like 7. And I have never had pink eye in my life. In my life. So between about 4:30 and 6 that morning, I got pink eye. And so she brought John to the door, and he said goodbye.
Wow.
And Steve heard him coo on the phone.
Years later, then you saw him, right? 28?
Well, 18 years now. It's because Tatum's 18. It was 18 years ago we found each other.
Okay. Wow.
He was 28.
Pardon?
He was 28.
Well, John was 28 when he didn't realize he was adopted.
Right, yeah.
And he was going to marry Justice. And he went to get his birth certificate, and he found out he was adopted, and then all that was a whole nother deal.
Yeah.
With his family. I think the sad thing is for John is I felt without a doubt, and Steve knew adopted kids too, we just knew that they were loved.
Yeah.
And I think the saddest thing for us, and John and we've cried many tears over this, John, Steve, and I, you can't go back. You can only go forward.
Yeah.
I think the saddest thing is his parents were like 36 and 37 when they adopted him, and they adopted his brother Kevin in Pennsylvania like 6 years earlier.
Right.
Anyway, and I think the saddest thing is they adopted him and Kevin to save a marriage that wasn't there. They slept in separate bedrooms. There wasn't any love between, they went through, the dad had money and a fairly successful career, like they went through the motions. That's the sad part, that John didn't get a lot of love, and that's sad.
Yeah.
But now we make up for it. So
Make up for it. He's tight with his cousins. And
So I have to back up a little bit, if I can.
Yeah.
When I lived in Oregon, I worked part-time at the Eola Inn restaurant, which Steve is still there. I just talked to a girl from Oregon. And it would be like a high-end, they serve lobster and things like that along the Willamette River. And it had been there for many years. And this German couple, married, no children, tough Germans, tough to work for, but wanted you to learn all the wines and wanted you to do it right. They owned this restaurant, and they were both survivors of the Holocaust.
Oh my.
And so I worked there, and Raymond Nebergall, I worked sometimes the lunch hour shift or the early dinner shift, and they had closed like at 9, they weren't open late. And he would come in all the time, and Nebergall meats in Eugene, in Oregon, would be like John Morrell meats, here as an example. And he was Mr. Nebergall of Nebergall Meats, and he was older at the time, 75. Wally reminded me of him. He was built like Wally, little thin older man, not overweight or anything. And his wife, who he loved, was really in a mental institution. They never had children, and I never met her, but he would cry a lot over her. He had a sad life, lots of money, sad life. And he had a niece, and he liked to travel. He traveled all over the world. Then he had a heart condition, and he couldn't travel alone, so his niece traveled with him for a long time, who I met a number of times. Then she was getting engaged to get married, and he still wanted to travel. And he was good friends with the German couple that owned the Eola Inn restaurant. And he had some connections from North Dakota years ago. I'm from Daisy, North Dakota. I'm this farm girl. I was kind to him and waited on him, and we became really good friends. Really, really good friends. And one time he wanted to go to South America. He had been there before. He wanted to go again to another part. And so fast forward, he invited me along to go to South America with him. Wait, the first trip we took, so this is how we would do it. I was living with Judy in Oregon, and he would
Keep going.
he would pay the rent and pay the groceries, so it was business as usual for my financial obligation for Judy. And then he would talk to the owner of the Eola Inn, and they would let me take off work, and then I would go on a trip with him. And he couldn't go alone, so I would have to go. I mean, I'd have to give him like his pills, and I mean, I was clearly like a nurse. But he was about Wally's size, but he weighed the same as high school. He only wore cashmere, and he would buy a new high-end Cadillac every year. And every trip we took, He was a travel agent that he worked with. So if we went to Hawaii, the travel agent would set him up with an older person his age who was born and raised in Hawaii. If we were in Rio de Janeiro, we would be set up with someone who was born and raised in Rio de Janeiro, an older gentleman his age. So who knew it all.
And he would take him around.
He would take us around. We'd have private tours. And anyway, so I would take off work with a German couple. It was kind of hard because I'd come back from a trip and some of my coworkers weren't very nice to me. They were jealous.
Oh.
That was a little odd. But I'd have my job back. Judy's apartment was paid for. And then I think she got to have her boyfriend move in, whatever, it doesn't matter. But that's how it was. And so we would take trips. The first one we took was his sister Lois lived in L.A. And all the siblings were very wealthy. And we bought a brand new Cadillac. He let me go pick it out at the lot at this. He'd worked with Joe at the dealership, and he had all these connections. And so I drove. He never drove when I was with him. We took Highway 101. We stopped in all along the way.
Carmel and their point.
Stayed in high-end hotels.
That's really cool.
High-end hotels, we did that. We were gone for about, first we were gone for about a month. And then we ended up staying at Lois's in L.A. and then kind of outside of Hollywood. And we did lots of stuff. I mean, it was amazing.
Universal Studios.
All that stuff. Yeah, we did it all.
Pretty energetic and wanted to do stuff all the time.
Very energetic. He'd go to bed early. And he always had Chivas scotch for dinner. He'd have 2 scotches at night. So he'd go to bed early.
Yeah.
I mean, he'd probably be in bed by 9.
Okay.
I mean, he was a little old man.
Yeah.
And I'd have to give him his meds during the day. And he'd have to put that thing under his tongue. What do you call that? For
Nitro?
Yeah, he had a regular heartbeat or something. Yeah, I'd have to give him, and I'd have to be sure to time it. And so I had my task to do.
Yeah.
To make sure he was taken care of.
So you went to L.A., you went to
We did
Hawaii.
there, and then we came back, and I'd work a little bit, and then we spent 2 months in South America. And we always traveled five star, always 5-star. We were in the Panama Canal, went through Panama Canal, and then we were at, the Amazon, Rio de Janeiro, Caracas, Venezuela, Iguazu Falls, Buenos Aires, Argentina, 9 different countries. We were held at gunpoint in Buenos Aires at the airport. We were flying in, and all these soldiers were looking for something on the plane. I'm going to take a picture of them. And this guy, he was from Udemy, and put his bayonet up like this, like I wet my pants.
You actually wet your pants.
I wet my pants. Well, they were, and I wasn't supposed to do it.
Yeah.
Mr. Nebergo was mad at me for doing that. I should have known better.
Yeah.
And we would travel, and he would take me into a store, like in Buenos Aires. I could buy anything I wanted to.
Wow.
And in Rio. And what is interesting, when you were raised poor, and I would look at the Sears and the Montgomery Ward catalogs and circle all this stuff.
Yeah.
Then I could go into a store. He would give me carte blanche. One thing. I could only buy one thing. I didn't want anything.
Oh,
it was a weird deal.
Huh.
He got me some gold jewelry, and I got some. The thing is, when you're that age, you buy stupid stuff, like cute little Happy Legs pants.
Okay.
I mean, not a diamond ring.
Yeah.
It was weird.
Yeah.
I mean, stupid things that were my age, except I had a leather jacket made for me. So he had been there before, so he had been at these tailors, and they all knew who he was, and they'd ship him things, and in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And then we went to like a ranch, like the poncho, the ranches down there. And it was amazing. We were all through 2 months.
2 months. In
Lima, Peru, where Bob Holmgren's, we talked. Yeah, it was quite an experience.
Lima, Peru, or Bob Holmgren?
Bob Holmgren's wife is from Lima.
Oh, okay, yeah.
What's her name?
Yep.
Bertha.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we traveled all through South America. And then we came back, and I'd work a little bit more, and then we spent a month in Hawaii. Mm-hmm. But I got kind of bored.
Yeah.
He didn't really want me. He was a little, and then we went on a cruise. We went on 2 cruises to Cayman, Virgin Islands.
When he went to bed at 9 o'clock, he wanted to.
We would always have a room with an adjoining door.
Right.
Because I had to check on him. Yeah. I mean, I had my duty. He could bathe and dress himself. He wasn't like.
Yeah.
But he just moved slower. I remember he'd walk like a little shuffly, because he had some health problems. And I remember having to have a lot of patience, and I would get really frustrated
Yeah, you're
because it was
go.
boring.
Yeah.
Very boring parts of the time.
Yeah.
But then he would go, I'd go sit by the pool, and I'd have a drink by the pool, and I would do things. And I remember in Hawaii, I went on a couple of dates. And then when we were on board the cruise ship, this one trip we went on, and he'd have a room and I'd have a room adjoining doors. And we had these, you know, not maitre d's, the people that look off at you on your cruise ships. What do they call them?
Stewards.
Stewards. But this one, I remember this one rich older lady. I think she thought I was his girlfriend.
Yeah.
She didn't believe it.
Yeah.
And I remember she'd had a couple of drinks one time, and she came up to me, and I was like, and then Mr. Neverglove got really mad. Like, he talked to the captain to leave me alone.
Wow.
Yeah, she was just
Yeah.
being naughty,
Yeah.
you know, insinuating things that weren't there. I mean, he was like a Wally kind of a guy.
Sure. Yeah.
And I had to lay his clothes out, and but everything was always, he had the dry cleaner, before he left, he had all of his bags, these people at this dry cleaners, they'd iron his silk underwear. They would press everything and have it all, like, let's say this garment bag would have the socks, the shoes, the underwear, the shirt, everything. And then this next, he had these big trunks of stuff that we'd have with us that I never handled.
Cashmere every day.
Always cashmere. Only ever cashmere.
And how did he make his money? Just out of curiosity.
Never got meats, and then the stock market, and he owned big buildings in Portland and office buildings and stuff.
So eventually you said, I'm tired of.
Well,
this,
I was in Hawaii, and then then my dad had a heart attack, and we were going to go to England, Scotland, and Ireland. He had the trip all planned. In fact, the day my dad had the heart attack, we were going to be leaving. I mean, we had it all set to go.
Yeah.
And then I was home for 2 months.
Yeah.
And I got pregnant.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of tired then.
You ever stay in touch with him after
Oh
that?
yes.
Okay.
Oh yes.
Wow.
Yeah, he died. We were in Australia.
Okay.
He actually died we went to Australia in March of '76, and he died the end of '70s, like that year he died.
Who was at our wedding?
He was at our wedding.
In Oregon? Yeah. You got married in Oregon, right? Eugene?
And he gave us.
Mom and Dad came out?
Uh-huh.
Your folks come out?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And my sister, Jane did not. I think Jane was pregnant. Monica was my maid of honor. I had a small wedding. We had a small wedding. And Mary Kay and Jean came out, just as the sisters. We were married at 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning in a rounded glass church up in the hills, the Colbert Hills in Eugene, Oregon.
Neat.
Yes, and during the service, I looked like Mother Nature with my outfit. I had I didn't wear a bra, and I had this gunny sack. Gunny sacks back in the day was a very cotton, expensive, bohemian little dresses of that era, which are popular now. And I had,
Garland
in my hair and a little ribbon. It was very Mother Nature looking.
Yeah.
And anyway, during the church service, we were married 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning. Like, here's the priest, and the priest was a hippie pot-smoking priest.
Oh.
We were ready to go and have all these premarital classes. We met with him once. At the end of the day, he goes, you love each other, yes, love each other. Good, done. Boom, signed off, done. No classes needed. That was funny. And he led the ceremony, and he was a cool guy, actually, but kind of like a hippie priest.
Yeah.
And this mother and her fawns came out, this mother that side. And I remember, here's me, the ceremony, glassed-in church, and I could see all of the guests were looking at the mother and the fawns, which they were right up by the window. It was cute.
Yeah.
And we're getting married right here in this. Anyway,
Ah.
I was mad at those deer for that.
Yeah, it took
tension off me. Yeah.
Classic.
I think we've kind of gone a long time.
Well, we have. We'll do this again.
I think it's
an hour 18.
That's plenty.
That's plenty.
I have tried them all.
Okay. Well, now what I have to do on all of these is I have to get in there into the thing and just say hi with my subject. So I'm going to just go like this.
What do you have to do? Oh.
And here we go. This is one of the first time where I didn't have to prompt someone to talk.
Gary.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
All right.